Sienna Clark stood in a dark gas station parking lot, clutching 8 crumpled dollars in her hand. Her last $8, her daughter's breakfast money for the next morning. Then she heard it, a man gasping for air. A huge Hell's Angel biker collapsed near his motorcycle, clutching his chest. His face turned gray. He was dying right there on the pavement, and nobody else was around to help. "Don't get involved," the gas station attendant yelled from the doorway. "Those guys are nothing but trouble." Sienna looked at the dying man, then at her $8. She thought about her daughter Maya waking up hungry the next day, but she couldn't just walk away. She ran inside, bought aspirin and water with her last $8, and knelt beside him. She saved his life without even knowing who he was. What Sienna didn't know was that this one choice would change everything. Because the next morning, 100 motorcycles roared up to her street. But let me take you back to the morning before that gas station, before everything changed. Sienna's alarm blared at 5 a.m., like it did every single day. She dragged herself out of bed in the tiny apartment she shared with her 6-year-old daughter, Maya. The place was small, run down, in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but it was home. She walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinet. One box of cereal, almost empty, half a carton of milk in the fridge. She poured the last bit into Maya's bowl and tried to make it stretch as far as it would go. Maya came padding out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, Mommy." "Morning, baby." Sienna kissed the top of her head and set the bowl on the table. She didn't make one for herself. There wasn't enough. This was life now. Counting every dollar, stretching every meal, praying that nothing unexpected happened because there was no cushion, no safety net, nothing to fall back on. Sienna worked 2 jobs. Mornings at the laundromat, folding strangers' clothes for $11 an hour. Evenings at a diner, serving truckers and late-night crowds, hustling for tips that sometimes added up to $20, sometimes less. Her car had broken down 3 weeks ago. She couldn't afford to fix it. So now she walked everywhere, miles to work, miles home, in worn-out sneakers with a hole in the left sole. And the bills kept coming. Rent was due in 3 days. She was $150 short. The landlord had already threatened eviction once. Maya's asthma inhaler needed refilling, $60 she didn't have. The electricity bill had an overdue notice taped to the fridge. But Sienna didn't complain. She'd learned a long time ago that complaining didn't pay the bills. Her grandmother had raised her with one simple rule. Kindness costs nothing, baby, and sometimes it's all we got to give. So Sienna smiled at her coworkers even when she was exhausted. She asked customers how their day was going, even when her feet ached so bad she could barely stand. She kept a little journal by her bed where she wrote down 3 things she was grateful for every night, no matter how hard the day had been. That Tuesday started like every other day. She walked Maya to the neighbor's apartment before school, then headed to the laundromat. She folded clothes for 8 hours, her mind on autopilot. Jeans, towels, sheets, over and over. At 2 p.m., she clocked out and walked to the diner. Her shift didn't start until 3, but she liked to get there early, grab a coffee, sit in the back booth, and just breathe for a few minutes. Linda, her coworker, a kind older woman who'd worked at the diner for 20 years, slid into the booth across from her. "You look tired, honey." "I'm always tired," Sienna said with a small smile. "You work yourself to death for that little girl." "She's worth it." Linda patted her hand. "I know she is, but you gotta take care of yourself, too." "You hear me?" Sienna nodded, but they both knew she didn't have that luxury. Her evening shift was busy. Truckers, a few families, some teenagers getting late-night fries. She smiled, took orders, refilled coffee cups, and kept moving. By 10 p.m., when her shift ended, her tips added up to $23. She sat in the back room, counting the cash on the table. $23 in tips, plus the $8.47 she'd had left from yesterday. $31.47 total. She needed to keep enough for the bus to work the next day, 47 cents. That left her with $31. She tucked 23 away for rent. That left $8 for Maya's breakfast, and maybe something small for dinner the next night. $8. She folded the bills carefully and put them in her pocket. Then she started the 2-mile walk home. It was late. The streets were quiet. Sienna was exhausted, but she kept her head up and kept moving. She decided to cut through the gas station parking lot on her way. There was a restroom there, and she needed to stop. That's when everything changed. That's when she heard the man gasping for air. And in that moment, Sienna Clark had a choice to make. A choice that would cost her everything she had. A choice that would save a life. A choice that would reveal who she really was when nobody was watching. She had no idea that this one decision would change her life forever. Sienna pushed open the gas station restroom door and stepped back outside into the parking lot. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered and buzzed. It was just past 11 p.m. and the place was almost empty. That's when she saw him. A man, massive, probably 6'3", with a thick gray beard and arms covered in tattoos, leaned against a chrome motorcycle under one of the lights. He wore a black leather vest with patches all over it. Hell's Angels. Even from a distance, Sienna could see the skull logo. She'd heard stories about guys like him. Everybody had. Dangerous, criminal. Stay away. She started walking toward the street, minding her own business. Then the man stumbled, his hand shot to his chest, his face twisted in pain. He dropped to one knee, gasping. Sienna stopped. The man collapsed onto the pavement, flat on his back. His breathing came in short, desperate bursts. His lips were turning blue. She stood there, frozen. Every instinct screamed at her to keep walking. This wasn't her problem. She had Maya to think about. She had enough trouble in her own life. But then she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold. The man wasn't breathing anymore. His chest had stopped moving. Hey, Sienna shouted toward the gas station. Hey, somebody call 911. The attendant, a white guy in his 30s, stepped outside with a cigarette in his hand. He looked at the man on the ground, then at Sienna. Lady, you crazy? That's a Hell's Angel. Leave him alone. He's probably high on something. He's having a heart attack, Sienna said, her voice rising. The attendant shrugged. Not our problem. Those guys are nothing but trouble. Trust me, you don't want to get involved. An older man, maybe 60, white, wearing a trucker hat, walked out of the store with a bag of chips. He saw the scene and shook his head. He walked over to Sienna and grabbed her arm gently. Miss, listen to me. Don't get involved. People like that, they're dangerous. You've got a kid to think about, don't you? I can tell. Just walk away. Sienna pulled her arm back. A man is dying. The trucker shook his head again, muttered something under his breath, and walked to his car. He drove off without looking back. Sienna stood there alone in the parking lot. The attendant went back inside, leaving her with the dying man. She looked down at him. His chest wasn't moving. His face was gray. She thought about her grandmother. Years ago, her grandmother had collapsed on a city sidewalk, a stroke. People walked past her. Nobody stopped. By the time someone finally called for help, it was too late. Sienna had been 12 years old when she got that phone call. She'd never forgotten it. She dropped to her knees beside the man. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open, just barely. He tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. Heart meds. Forgot. Sienna pulled out her phone. 1 bar of signal, 10% battery. She dialed 911. The call dropped. Damn it. She stood up and ran toward the gas station. She burst through the door. Call an ambulance right now. He's dying out there. The attendant rolled his eyes but picked up the phone behind the counter. Sienna didn't wait. She scanned the shelves, grabbed a bottle of aspirin and a bottle of water. She ran to the counter and slammed them down. How much? $6.50. She pulled the $8 from her pocket, Maya's breakfast money, and handed it over. The attendant gave her $1.50 in change. She didn't wait for a receipt. She ran back outside. The man was still on the ground, barely conscious. Sienna twisted the cap off the aspirin bottle, shook 2 tablets into her hand, opened the water, and knelt beside him. Hey, look at me. I need you to chew these. Can you do that? He opened his mouth weakly. She placed the tablets on his tongue. Chew. Come on. He chewed slowly, wincing. She held the water bottle to his lips, and he took a small sip. Help is coming, she said, her hand on his shoulder. You're going to be okay. Just stay with me. His hand reached up and grabbed hers. His grip was weak, but it was there. What's your name? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Sienna. Sienna Clark. Sienna? He coughed. You saved my life. Not yet, but I'm trying. In the distance, sirens wailed. They were getting closer. Then, out of nowhere, another motorcycle roared into the parking lot. A younger guy, maybe 30, also wearing a vest, jumped off and ran over. Hawk. Oh my God, Hawk. He dropped to his knees on the other side of the man. He looked at Sienna, his eyes wide with shock. You helped him? He needed help, Sienna said simply. The younger guy stared at her like she'd just done something impossible. Most people cross the street when they see us. Sienna didn't respond. She just kept her hand on Hawk's shoulder until the ambulance pulled into the lot. The paramedics rushed over with a stretcher and equipment. One of them looked at Sienna. Did you give him aspirin? Yes, 2 tablets, maybe 3 minutes ago. The paramedic nodded. Smart move. You probably just saved his life. They loaded Hawk onto the stretcher. He reached out and grabbed Sienna's wrist one more time, his eyes locked onto hers. Tell them Hawk sent you. She had no idea what that meant. The younger guy stood up as the ambulance doors closed. He walked over to Sienna, pulled a business card from his wallet, and handed it to her. It was plain white with just a phone number and a small logo, a crown with wings. My name's Cole, he said. Hawk's going to want to thank you. Please call this number tomorrow. Sienna took the card, her hands shaking. She looked at the logo, then back at Cole. Who is he, she asked. Cole smiled, but there was something heavy in his expression. Someone important. Someone who doesn't forget kindness. The ambulance pulled away, sirens blaring. The gas station attendant stood in the doorway, arms crossed, shaking his head. Sienna stood alone in the parking lot with $1.50 in her pocket and no idea what she'd just done. She walked home in the dark, replaying everything. The attendant's words echoed in her mind. Those guys are nothing but trouble. But all she'd seen was a man who needed help. Had she made a mistake? She didn't know yet, but she was about to find out. The paramedics worked fast. One of them placed an oxygen mask over Hawk's face, while the other checked his vitals. Sienna stood back, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline. Cole paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair. He looked terrified. Is he going to be okay? He asked the paramedics. We got him stable, one of them said. But if this lady hadn't given him aspirin when she did, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Cole turned to Sienna. His eyes were red. You don't understand, Hawk. He's not just anybody. He's everything to us. Sienna didn't know what to say. I just did what anyone would do. No. Cole shook his head firmly. Most people would have walked away, especially from someone who looks like him. The paramedics loaded Hawk into the ambulance. Before they closed the doors, Hawk pulled the oxygen mask down slightly and looked at Sienna. Thank you, he mouthed. She nodded. The ambulance doors closed, and the vehicle pulled away into the night. Cole stood there for a moment, watching it disappear. Then he turned back to Sienna. You got kids? The question caught her off guard. Yeah, a daughter, Maya. She's 6. What's your situation? Are you working? Sienna hesitated. She didn't know this man, but something about the way he asked, gentle, genuine, made her answer. 2 jobs. We're managing. Cole looked down at her shoes, the hole in the left sole, her worn jeans, the exhaustion written all over her face. Yeah, he said quietly. I bet. He pulled out his wallet. It was thick with cash. He started counting bills. Let me give you something for the aspirin, for your time, for what you did. Sienna stepped back. No, please. I said no. Her voice was firm. I didn't do it for money. Cole stopped. He stared at her for a long moment. Then why? Because he needed help. That's it. Cole slowly put his wallet away. He studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, the same one he'd shown her before. Plain white. Phone number, crown with wings logo. Hawk's going to want to thank you himself, Cole said. Tomorrow afternoon, please call this number. Sienna took the card, planning to throw it away the moment she got home. I'll think about it. Please, Cole said again. There was something almost desperate in his voice. Just call. That's all I'm asking. She nodded, slipping the card into her pocket. Cole got on his motorcycle. Before he rode off, he looked back at her one more time. You're a good person, Sienna Clark. Don't ever let anyone tell you differently. Then he was gone. Sienna stood alone in the gas station parking lot. The attendant had gone back inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Everything felt surreal, like she'd just stepped out of a dream. She started walking home, 2 miles in the dark with $1.50 in her pocket. Her mind raced the entire way. What had just happened? Who was Hawk? Why did Cole look at her like she'd done something extraordinary? All she'd done was help someone. But the way they reacted, it was like no one had ever helped them before. She thought about the attendant's warning. Those guys are nothing but trouble. She thought about the trucker who told her to walk away. Maybe they were right. Maybe she just made a huge mistake. Maybe tomorrow she'd wake up and regret everything. But she couldn't shake the image of Hawk lying on that pavement, his chest not moving, his face turning gray. If she'd walked away, he'd be dead. That was the truth. And she didn't know how to regret saving someone's life. By the time she got home, it was nearly 1 a.m. Her neighbor, Mrs. Lane, an older woman who watched Maya when Sienna worked late, was asleep on the couch with Maya curled up beside her. Sienna gently shook Mrs. Lane awake. "I'm home. Thank you so much." Mrs. Lane nodded groggily and shuffled out. Sienna carefully lifted Maya and carried her to bed. Maya stirred slightly. "Mommy." "Shoo. Go back to sleep, baby." "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too." Sienna tucked the blanket around her daughter and kissed her forehead. Then, she walked back to the kitchen and sat down at the small table. She pulled the business card out of her pocket and stared at it. The Crown with Wings logo glinted under the dim overhead light. She turned it over. Nothing on the back, just a phone number. Who were these people? She looked at the $1.50 sitting on the table. The next morning, Maya would wake up and ask for breakfast, and Sienna would have to tell her they'd have crackers and the last banana, nothing else, because she'd spent her last $8 on a stranger. She pulled out her journal, a small notebook she kept by the window. Every night, no matter how hard things were, she wrote down 3 things she was grateful for. It was something her grandmother had taught her. She opened to a blank page and wrote, 1. Maya is healthy. 2. I helped someone tonight. 3. The next day is a new day. She closed the journal and looked at the business card again. She set it on the nightstand beside her bed. Then she lay down, exhausted, and closed her eyes. She had no idea what the next day would bring. She had no idea that across town in a hospital room, Hawk was telling Cole to gather everyone. She had no idea that her name was being spoken in rooms she'd never seen by people she'd never met. She had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. All she knew was that she'd done the right thing. And sometimes that's all you can do, even when it costs you everything. Sienna's alarm went off at 5 a.m. Just like always, she dragged herself out of bed, her body aching from the long day before. She walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinet. 1 banana, a handful of crackers. That was it. She split the banana in half, arranged the crackers on a plate, and poured a glass of water. Maya came padding out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, Mommy. What's for breakfast?" "A special breakfast the next day, baby." Sienna forced a smile. "Banana and crackers, your favorite." Maya didn't complain. She never did. She climbed into her chair and started eating. Sienna didn't make anything for herself. There wasn't enough. She sat across from Maya, watching her eat, trying not to think about how empty the cabinets were, trying not to think about the $8 she'd spent the night before. Then there was a knock at the door. Sienna frowned. It was barely 7 a.m. Who would be knocking this early? She opened the door. Mrs. Johnson stood there, her neighbor, a black woman in her 60s who'd lived on this street for 30 years. She had her arms crossed and a deep frown on her face. "Sienna, baby," Mrs. Johnson said, her voice tight. "We need to talk." "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. Is everything okay?" Mrs. Johnson stepped closer and lowered her voice. "I heard you helped one of those biker thugs the night before. One of those Hell's Angels." Sienna's stomach dropped. How did she know? "He was having a heart attack, Mrs. Johnson. I had to." "Child, those Hell's Angels are criminals." Mrs. Johnson cut her off. "Drugs, violence, all kinds of mess. What were you thinking? You got Maya to think about." "He was a human being who needed help," Sienna said, her voice steady but quiet. "That's all I saw." Mrs. Johnson shook her head, disappointment written all over her face. "You're too kind for your own good, Sienna. That kindness is going to get you hurt one day. Mark my words." She turned and walked back to her apartment, leaving Sienna standing in the doorway. Sienna closed the door slowly and leaned against it. Her hands were shaking. Had she made a mistake? She looked at Maya, still eating her crackers, completely unaware of the conversation that had just happened. Sienna forced herself to breathe. "Finish up, baby. Time to get ready for school." At the laundromat, Sienna folded clothes on autopilot. Her mind kept replaying Mrs. Johnson's words. That kindness is going to get you hurt. Linda, her co-worker, noticed. She walked over and sat down beside Sienna. "You okay, honey?" You look like you didn't sleep. Sienna hesitated, then told her everything. The gas station, the biker, the heart attack, using her last $8. Linda's eyes went wide. You helped a Hell's Angel? Girl, you're braver than me. Or stupider, Sienna muttered. According to Mrs. Johnson. Linda reached over and squeezed her hand. Baby, you did what your heart told you to do. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that. But what if she's right? What if I brought trouble into my life? Linda looked her in the eye. You saved a man's life, Sienna. That's never the wrong thing to do. Sienna wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at her. During her break, she pulled out the business card. She stared at the Crown with Wings logo, turning it over in her fingers. She pulled out her phone and typed a text message to the number on the card. Asterisk hi. This is Sienna Clark. Cole gave me this number. Asterisk, she hit send before she could change her mind. Within seconds, her phone rang. She stared at the screen. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, she listened to the message. Sienna, it's Cole. Hawk wants to meet you the next day. Can you come to Murphy's Diner on 5th Street at 3 p.m? It's important, please. Sienna's heart pounded. Linda leaned over. What did they say? They want to meet me the next afternoon. Then go, Linda said. What's the worst that could happen? Free coffee. Sienna tried to smile, but her stomach was in knots. She was off work at 2 p.m. She could make it to the diner by 3. But what would people think? What would Mrs. Johnson say if she found out? What if this really was a mistake? As she left the laundromat that afternoon, she noticed something. 2 motorcycles parked across the street, 2 men in vests watching. When she looked at them, they nodded respectfully. Then they rode off. Sienna stood on the sidewalk, her heart racing. What had she walked into? And, more importantly, could she walk back out? Sienna took the bus to 5th Street. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. As the bus turned the corner, she saw them. Motorcycles, dozens of them, parked in perfect rows outside Murphy's Diner, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. Her stomach dropped. The bus stopped. Sienna almost stayed in her seat, but something made her stand up and walk toward that diner. Bikers lined the sidewalk. Big men with tattoos and gray beards. Women, too, arms crossed, standing tall, all wearing vests with patches. They weren't loud. They weren't threatening. They were waiting. As Sienna walked past, each one nodded to her. One older man tipped his cap. Sienna's heart pounded. What did that mean? She reached the door, took a breath, and walked inside. Every booth and table was crammed with bikers. The diner went completely silent, like someone had hit the mute button. Every single head turned. Every pair of eyes zeroed in on her. Cole emerged from the back, a wide smile plastered on his face. Sienna, thank you for coming. Hawk's waiting. As they navigated through the maze of tables, something unbelievable happened. The bikers started to stand. One by one, they rose to their feet as she passed, like a human wave rippling across the room. Sienna had absolutely no clue what it signified, but it felt hallowed. Cole guided her to a booth tucked away in the corner. Hawk was already there, looking significantly better than the night before. The moment he spotted her, he slowly pushed himself up, wincing a little. Sienna Clark, please, have a seat. She slid into the booth across from him. Hawk scrutinized her intently. How are you feeling? I'm fine. How about you? Doctor said if you hadn't acted as quickly as you did, I'd be pushing up daisies. Heart attack. I'm just relieved you're okay. Hawk leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Cole told me everything. You wouldn't take any money. You've got a daughter, 2 jobs. You used your last $8 to save my life. Sienna squirmed, feeling a little awkward. It wasn't about the money. I know. That's precisely why I wanted to meet you. He reached into his pocket and produced a photograph, sliding it across the table towards her. It showed a younger Hawk standing next to a woman. Sandwiched between them was a little girl, probably around 7, with bright, sparkling eyes and a smile that could light up a room. That's my daughter, Hawk said, his voice barely a whisper. Her name was Lily. Was leukemia? She was 7 years old. We couldn't scrape together enough money for the treatments quickly enough. By the time we finally got the funds, it was too late. Sienna's throat constricted, making it difficult to swallow. I'm so incredibly sorry. Hawk's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking. After she passed, I made a promise to myself. Anyone who demonstrates genuine kindness, especially when they've got next to nothing, I'm going to help them out. It's what Lily would have wanted. Sienna was at a loss for words. Hawk locked eyes with her. Tomorrow morning, something's going to happen. Don't be afraid. Just trust me. What do you mean? Hawk simply smiled enigmatically. You'll see. He stood up, shook her hand firmly, left a wad of cash on the table, and then walked out of the diner with Cole in tow. Sienna sat there alone, surrounded by the silent, watchful bikers, feeling utterly perplexed. An older biker leaned in close to her. You did good, miss. Real good. She still had absolutely no idea what any of it meant. Back on Sienna's street, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. Mrs. Johnson stood on her porch, deep in conversation with Mr. Rodriguez, a man in his 40s who lived 3 doors down. That Sienna girl is mixed up with those bikers now, Mrs. Johnson said, her voice dripping with disapproval. I told her no good would come of it. Mr. Rodriguez frowned, his brow furrowed with concern. Hell's Angels on our street? We have to do something about this. A young mother overheard their conversation. I'm keeping my kids locked inside tomorrow, she declared, her voice filled with anxiety. Word spread like wildfire. By dinner time, the entire block was on edge. Parents were issuing stern warnings to their children, telling them to stay inside. Curtains remained tightly drawn. Doors stayed securely locked. No one had any idea what was coming, but everyone was gripped by fear. And Sienna, as she rode the bus home, felt a heavy pit forming in her stomach, wondering if she had just made the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of her life. Tomorrow, she would find out the answer. Sienna was jolted awake by a sound like a thunderclap, a deep, guttural rumbling that vibrated through the walls and rattled the windows. Engines. She scrambled out of bed and rushed to the window, peering out in disbelief. Her street was absolutely packed with motorcycles, hundreds upon hundreds of them. Chrome gleaming in the morning sun, black leather vests. Bikers standing ramrod straight, in perfect formation. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Maya came running into the room, her eyes wide with alarm. Mommy, why are there so many motorcycles? Sienna didn't have an answer. She quickly threw on some clothes and hurried outside, Maya clinging tightly to her hand. The entire neighborhood had poured out onto the street, but they weren't driven by curiosity. They were terrified. Windows slammed shut, doors were bolted, and parents were frantically dragging their children back inside. Mrs. Johnson stood on her porch, clutching her cell phone to her ear. Yes, police. There's a motorcycle gang on our street. Mr. Rodriguez stormed towards Sienna, his face flushed with anger. Sienna, what have you done? Why are they here? You've brought a gang to our street. Our kids live here. Other neighbors began to gather around, their voices rising in a crescendo of anger and accusation. What were you thinking? I told you so, Mrs. Johnson shouted, her voice shrill. I warned you. The crowd surged closer, a sea of angry faces and pointing fingers. Maya started to cry, burying her face in Sienna's leg. Mommy, I'm scared. Sienna pulled her daughter close, her own hands trembling. It's okay, baby, she murmured, trying to reassure her, but she wasn't sure if it was. Cole stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. Folks, we're not here to cause any trouble. Then why are you here, mister? Mr. Rodriguez yelled, his voice laced with hostility. We're here to help one of your own. Sienna saved a life 2 nights ago. Now, we're here to save hers. Silence descended over the crowd. At that moment, a trailer truck rumbled up and parked at the end of the street. Bikers immediately began unloading boxes. Cole turned to address the crowd. My name is Cole. I'm a volunteer with Lily's Legacy, a non-profit organization that helps struggling families. Non-profit? Someone muttered skeptically, their voice dripping with disbelief. Hawk, the man Sienna saved? He's our founder. He started Lily's Legacy after his daughter passed away from leukemia. We've helped over 3,000 families in the past 20 years. We raise money, build homes, and pay medical bills. Mr. Rodriguez's face visibly changed. Wait a minute. Lily's Legacy? You helped my cousin in Detroit. Miguel Rodriguez, a veteran with PTSD. You paid for his therapy. Cole nodded, his expression serious. A woman gasped, her eyes wide with realization. You paid for my son's heart surgery 2 years ago. Another voice chimed in, filled with gratitude. You saved my grandmother's house from foreclosure. The entire atmosphere on the street began to shift. Fear and suspicion were slowly being replaced by understanding. Mrs. Johnson covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filled with remorse. Lord, we judged you all so wrong. Hawk slowly stepped out of the truck, moving with a noticeable limp. The crowd instinctively parted as he walked toward Sienna. He turned to face the neighbors, his gaze sweeping over them. I get it, Hawk said, his voice surprisingly gentle. You saw the jackets, the bikes, the tattoos. You got scared. That's human nature. He pointed toward Sienna. But this woman didn't see any of that. She saw a man who was dying and used her last $8, her daughter's breakfast money, to save my life. Complete silence fell over the street. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. She just saw a human being who needed help. That's the kind of world I'm trying to build, where people see people, not stereotypes. Mr. Williams, an elderly black man who had lived on the street for over 40 years, stepped forward, his eyes glistening with tears. I judged you by your jacket, not your heart. I was wrong. I'm sorry. He extended his hand towards Hawk. Hawk grasped his hand firmly and shook it. We all make mistakes, sir. One by one, neighbors began to approach, offering apologies. Thank yous. Shaking hands. Mr. Rodriguez walked up to Sienna, his face etched with regret. I'm sorry I yelled at you. You were braver than all of us. Sienna was speechless. Hawk turned to her, his expression sincere. You gave me a second chance. Let me give you one. He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a check for $25,000. Sienna stared at the check, completely unable to process what she was seeing. For rent, medical bills, whatever you need, Hawk said. But there was more. A formal letter printed on official letterhead. Lily's Legacy offers you the position of Community Outreach Coordinator. Salary $52,000 a year. Full benefits. Health insurance. Start date in 2 weeks. Sienna's knees buckled and she collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Maya knelt down beside her, her face filled with concern. Mommy, why are you crying? Happy tears, baby, Sienna choked out, her voice thick with emotion. The neighbors erupted in applause, their cheers echoing down the street. Some were crying too, overcome by the sheer emotion of the moment. Engines revved to life, a thunderous celebration shaking the very foundations of the street. Mrs. Johnson rushed over and pulled Sienna into a warm embrace. Baby, you showed us how to be better people. I'm so sorry. Hawk knelt down beside Sienna, wincing slightly. One more thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a car key. We bought your car back from the impound lot. Fully repaired. It's around the corner. Sienna looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. Why? Why all of this? Hawk's eyes glistened with unshed tears. 20 years ago, my daughter died because we didn't have enough money. I swore I'd never let that happen to another family. You saved my life with your last few dollars. Didn't hesitate. Didn't ask for anything in return. That's the kind of person the world needs. That's the kind of person I need. I'm nobody special. You're wrong, Hawk said firmly. You're exactly who we've been looking for. Cole stepped forward, a wide grin on his face. There's more. Come on. He led her towards the trailer truck. Inside, it was packed with furniture, a brand new bed for Maya, groceries, toys, school supplies, clothes. Sienna laughed through her tears, disbelief and joy swirling together inside her. This is too much, she protested, overwhelmed by the generosity. It's not enough, Hawk countered gently. But it's a start. The bikers began unloading the truck, carrying boxes and furniture towards Sienna's apartment. The neighbors, who had been terrified just an hour before, stepped forward to help. Mr. Rodriguez grabbed a box. Where do you want this? Mrs. Johnson directed traffic, her voice filled with newfound enthusiasm. Careful with that bed. The young mother who had locked her children inside now had them helping carry toys towards the apartment. The entire street had come together, fear and prejudice transforming into community and love. Hawk stood beside Sienna, watching the scene unfold. Tomorrow, we start planning the community center, right here in this neighborhood. A community center? Sienna asked, her voice filled with wonder. Clark House, Hawk said, smiling. Named after you. Sienna shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You can't do that. I can, Hawk said firmly, and I am. Maya tugged on her mother's hand. Mommy, they brought me a bike. Sienna looked down at her daughter's face, radiant with pure joy. No fear, only happiness. and something inside her finally broke open. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of real hope. "Thank you," she whispered to Hawk, her voice choked with emotion. "You already thanked me," Hawk said, smiling gently. "You saw me. Not the vest, not the tattoos, just me. That's all I needed." By noon, Sienna's apartment looked like a completely different place. The old, sagging couch was gone, replaced by a sturdy, new one with soft cushions. The wobbly kitchen table had been replaced with a solid wooden dining set, with 4 matching chairs. Maya's old mattress on the floor had been replaced with a real bed, complete with a frame, fresh sheets, and fluffy pillows. Bikers moved furniture in, while neighbors helped unpack boxes. Mr. Rodriguez was busy assembling Maya's new bed, his brow furrowed in concentration. Mrs. Johnson organized the kitchen cabinets, filling them with new plates and glasses. Maya ran from room to room, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, look, I have a real desk and books and toys." Sienna stood in the middle of it all, completely overwhelmed by the outpouring of kindness. Hawk sat down on the new couch and patted the spot beside him. "Sit down. Let's talk." Sienna sat down, still in a state of shock. "I want to explain the job," Hawk said. "What we'd need from you." "I'll do anything," Sienna said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I just want to help." Hawk smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "We get hundreds of requests every month. Single moms, veterans, families who can't afford medical care. I need someone who understands the struggle, someone who can look another person in the eye and see their heart." "That's me," Sienna said, nodding firmly. "I know. That's why you're hired," Hawk said. He pulled out a folder containing blueprints. "But there's more. I want to open a community center right here in this neighborhood." Sienna's eyes widened as she looked at the drawings. "Here? Why? Why not?" Hawk countered. "This is where people need it the most. Job training programs, a food bank, after-school programs for kids like Maya, a medical clinic." That's incredible," Sienna stammered, struggling to find the words to express her gratitude. Hawk pointed to the top of the blueprint. 2 words were printed in bold letters. "Clark House." "We're naming it after you," Hawk said, smiling. Sienna shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes again. "You can't do that. I didn't do anything special." Hawk looked her directly in the eye. "You saved my life with your last $8. That's the very definition of special." Tears streamed down Sienna's face. "Your job is to find people who need help," Hawk continued, his voice gentle but firm. "You'll visit families, review applications, connect them with resources. Everything you've been through, all the pain you've felt trying to make ends meet, that's your superpower now, because you know exactly what they're going through." Sienna nodded, wiping her eyes. "When do I start?" 2 weeks, Hawk said. "That gives you time to quit your other jobs and settle in." Hawk pulled out a benefits packet. "Health insurance starts on day 1. Covers everything, including Maya's asthma medication. Completely." Sienna's breath caught in her throat. "Completely?" "Completely," Hawk confirmed. "No copays, no deductibles. You'll never have to choose between her inhaler and groceries again." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Hawk waited patiently until she could breathe again. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice soft. He pulled out a vest. Not a Hell's Angels vest, but a volunteer vest for Lily's legacy. The organization's logo, a crown with wings, was embroidered on the back. "You're one of us now. Family." Sienna took the vest with trembling hands. She put it on and looked at herself in the mirror hanging on the wall. She barely recognized herself, but in a good way. "Your first job," Hawk said, smiling. "Find someone in this neighborhood who needs help. Use those same instincts that saved me. Then we'll help them together." Sienna thought for only a second. "Mrs. Patterson, 3 doors down. She's 80 years old and can't afford her heart medication. I've seen her cutting her pills in half to make them last." Hawk smiled. "Then let's go." They walked to Mrs. Patterson's apartment. Sienna, Hawk, and Cole. Sienna knocked on the door. Mrs. Patterson opened it slowly, surprised to see people on her doorstep. "Sienna, what's going on, dear?" "Mrs. Patterson, I'd like you to meet some friends. We're here to help." They sat down in Mrs. Patterson's small living room. Hawk explained the mission of Lily's legacy while the elderly woman listened intently, tears forming in her eyes. "Ma'am, what do you need most right now?" Hawk asked gently. Mrs. Patterson's voice shook with emotion. My heart medication. I can't afford it anymore. I've been cutting the pills in half, but I'm almost out. Hawk pulled out his cell phone and made a quick call. We'll have your prescription filled and delivered today. A full 3-month supply, no cost to you. Mrs. Patterson grabbed Sienna's hand, squeezing it tightly. You did this for me. We did this, Sienna said, smiling warmly. Together. Mrs. Patterson wept. As they left Mrs. Patterson's apartment, Sienna looked back at the elderly woman's grateful face. This is the best job I'll ever have, she said to Hawk, her voice filled with emotion. I know, Hawk replied, smiling. Because you understand what it means to need help. And now you get to be the person who shows up. They walked back to Sienna's apartment, where the celebration was still going strong. Neighbors laughed, bikers shared stories, and Maya played with her new toys. And for the first time in 3 years, Sienna Clark didn't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow was going to be okay. Actually, it was going to be better than okay. It was going to be beautiful. 6 months later, everything had changed. But the transformation didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't happen without its share of challenges. The day after the bikers descended on her street, someone posted a shaky video online. It showed Sienna standing on her sidewalk, surrounded by 100 Hells Angels motorcycles. The footage went viral almost instantly. The comments section exploded with activity. She's glorifying gang culture. Hells Angels are criminals. Don't be fooled by this feel-good story. This is all staged. There's no way this is real. Sienna saw them all. Every single negative comment. They stung, each one like a tiny pinprick. Linda called her, her voice filled with concern. Ignore them, honey. They don't know the truth. But the negative comments kept pouring in for weeks, a relentless barrage of negativity. Then, slowly but surely, something shifted. Families that Lily's legacy had helped began to share their own stories, posting videos, writing heartfelt testimonials, and speaking out about the impact the organization had made on their lives. A veteran in Ohio shared his story. They gave me housing when I had absolutely nothing. A single mother in Pennsylvania wrote, they paid for my daughter's surgery. She's alive today because of them. An elderly man in Michigan posted, they saved my home from foreclosure. I don't know what I would have done without them. The comments section began to change. I was wrong about bikers. I can't believe I judged them so harshly. This is what real charity looks like. This is what it means to give back to the community. Faith in humanity restored. Within a month, the hashtag Lily's Legacy was trending on social media, spreading the message of kindness and compassion far and wide. Month 1, Sienna sat at her new desk in the Lily's Legacy office. A nameplate sat proudly in front of her, reading Sienna Clark, Community Outreach Coordinator. She spent her days reviewing applications, making phone calls, and visiting families in need. Maya was thriving in her new school, making friends, and excelling in her studies. Her inhaler sat on the kitchen counter, always full, always accessible. No more cutting corners. No more fear. Month 2, a vacant lot in Sienna's neighborhood was transformed into a bustling construction site. Clark House was rising from the ground, brick by brick, a symbol of hope and community. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Sienna stood proudly with a shovel in her hand, surrounded by bikers, neighbors, and members of the community. Local news cameras filmed the entire event, capturing the excitement and anticipation. A reporter approached Sienna, microphone in hand, and asked, how does it feel to have a community center named after you? Sienna smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. It's not about me. It's about what happens when people choose kindness over fear. It's about what we can accomplish when we come together to help each other. Month 3, Sienna met Marcus, a young black veteran who was 32 years old and living in his car. He was struggling with PTSD and had lost hope. She sat with him in a coffee shop, listening intently as he shared his story. Tell me what you need, she said gently. A place to sleep, a job, a reason to keep going. Within a week, Lily's Legacy had placed Marcus in transitional housing and enrolled him in a job training program. 3 months later, Marcus was working at a local factory, earning a steady paycheck. He had his own apartment, a place to call home. He had hope. He came back to thank Sienna, shaking her hand with tears in his eyes. You gave me a second chance. No, Sienna said, smiling warmly. You gave yourself a second chance. I just opened the door. Month 4, Clark House officially opened its doors to the community. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew hundreds of people, all eager to celebrate this momentous occasion. Sienna and Maya stood together, side by side, and cut the ribbon, both of them laughing joyously. Inside, the building buzzed with life and activity. There was a job training center, a food bank, an after-school program for children, and a medical clinic offering free checkups to those in need. On opening day, 43 people came through the doors seeking help. All 43 left with something they needed, whether it was a warm meal, a job referral, or a glimmer of hope. Month 5, testimonials poured in from those who had been helped by Clark House and Lily's legacy. Rosa, a Latina mother of 3, shared her story. Lily's legacy paid for my daughter's surgery. Without them, I would have lost her. I am eternally grateful. Mr. Williams, the elderly man who had apologized to Hawk on Sienna's street, wrote, "They paid my property taxes. I get to keep my home because of them. They have given me a new lease on life." A teenage girl, 16, with dreams of going to college, said, "The after-school program at Clark House helped me get a scholarship. I'm going to study medicine. I want to give back to my community, just like Lily's legacy has given to me." Month 6, Sienna now led a team of 5 community outreach coordinators, each one a person she had helped first, and who were now paying it forward, spreading kindness and compassion throughout the community. Lily's legacy had expanded to 3 neighboring towns, each location modeled after Clark House. Hawk had made a full recovery and spent his days visiting the centers, meeting families, and shaking hands. He told Sienna one afternoon, "You know what Lily would say if she could see all of this?" "What?" She'd say, "Daddy, you did good." Documentary filmmakers came to interview Sienna, wanting to tell her remarkable story. She sat in front of the camera and spoke with simplicity and sincerity. "A year ago, I had $8 and a choice to make. Help a stranger or feed my daughter breakfast. I chose to help, and that one choice saved both of us." The short film premiered online and quickly went viral. Within a week, it had garnered over 5 million views, inspiring countless people to embrace kindness and compassion. One day, Sienna returned to the gas station where it had all started. She walked inside and asked the manager for permission to place a small plaque on the wall outside. He readily agreed. The plaque read, "Here, a small act of kindness changed everything. Lily's legacy." The gas station attendant, the one who had told her to leave Hawk alone that fateful night, saw her and walked over, his expression somber. "I remember you," he said quietly. "I told you not to help him." Sienna nodded, acknowledging his words. "I was wrong," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I've been following your story, watching what you've built. I'm sorry for what I said." Sienna smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "We all learn and grow. That's what matters." She walked out of that gas station for the second time, but this time, everything was different. This time, she wasn't alone. She had a family now, a community, a purpose. And it all started with $8 and a choice. 1 year after that life-altering night at the gas station, Clark House hosted an anniversary celebration. The building overflowed with people, a testament to the impact the organization had made on the community. There were families who had been helped, bikers who had volunteered their time, neighbors who had learned to see past their prejudices. Balloons hung from the ceiling, adding a festive atmosphere. A banner stretched across the wall, proclaiming in bold letters, "1 year of kindness." Sienna stood at a small podium, looking out at the crowd, her heart filled with gratitude. Maya sat in the front row, her face beaming with pride. Sienna cleared her throat and began to speak, her voice filled with emotion. "A year ago, I spent my last $8 on a stranger. I didn't know who he was. I didn't care. He needed help. That's it." The room erupted in applause, a wave of appreciation washing over her. "I was scared," Sienna continued, her voice trembling slightly. "People told me I was making a mistake, that I was bringing trouble into my life. And for a moment, I believed them." She looked at Hawk, who was standing in the back with his arms crossed and a proud smile on his face. "But what I learned is this. Kindness is never a mistake, even when it costs you everything, especially then." The applause grew louder, more fervent. Some people wiped their eyes, overcome by the power of her words. After the speech, a young woman approached Sienna, her eyes filled with nervousness. She was white, in her early 20s, and looked hesitant. "Hi," the woman said, her voice barely audible. "My name is Emily. I don't know if you remember me, but you helped my mom 6 months ago. She had cancer and couldn't afford treatment. Sienna searched her memory, trying to place the young woman's face. Mrs. Lawson? Emily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. She's in remission. The doctor said it's a miracle, but it wasn't a miracle. It was you. It was Lily's legacy. You saved her life. They embraced tightly, both crying, their tears mingling. Mrs. Johnson, now a regular volunteer at Clark House, walked over and gently pulled Sienna aside. "Baby, I need to say something," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "What is it, Mrs. Johnson?" "I'm sorry for what I said that morning, for judging you. For judging them." She gestured towards the bikers, who were scattered throughout the room, mingling with the crowd. "You taught this old woman that it's never too late to change, that even someone like me can learn to see the world with different eyes." Sienna squeezed her hand, offering her reassurance. "You were just trying to protect me. I understand. Still, I was wrong, and I'm grateful you didn't listen to me." That evening, after the anniversary celebration had ended, Sienna walked home, as she always did. She still preferred to walk everywhere, even though her car was fully repaired and reliable. She liked the quiet of the streets, the time it gave her to think and reflect. As she passed a different gas station, she saw a young man sitting on the curb, his head in his hands. He appeared to be Latino, maybe 22 years old, and was clearly distressed. Sienna stopped, her heart going out to him. "Hey, are you okay?" The young man looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "My car broke down. I don't have any money for a tow. I'm supposed to pick up my son from daycare in 20 minutes, and I don't know what I'm going to do." Sienna opened her purse and pulled out $50, handing it to him. "What? No, I can't take that," he protested, shaking his head. "Yes, you can," Sienna said firmly. "Get your car towed. Get your son." The young man stared at the money, as if it were a miracle. "I don't even know you. Why would you do this?" "You don't have to," Sienna said, smiling gently. She pulled out a Lily's Legacy card and handed it to him. "When you're back on your feet, help someone else. Pass it on. And if you ever need more help, call that number." Tears streamed down his face as he took the card. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I won't forget this." Sienna smiled, her heart full. "I know you won't." She turned and walked away, her steps light. A year ago, she had been the one with nothing, the one who needed help. Now, she was the one giving it, passing on the kindness that had been shown to her. The cycle continued, each act of generosity creating more kindness, rippling outward into the world. And somewhere, Sienna knew, Lily was watching, smiling, proud of the legacy that had been created in her name. Sienna's story had started with $8 and a choice. She could have walked away, ignored the man in need, and focused on her own struggles. She could have listened to the fear and prejudice that surrounded her. But she didn't. She saw a human being who needed help, and she helped, without hesitation. That one choice changed everything, transforming her life and the lives of countless others. Here's my question for you. Who can you help today? Who needs your $8, your time, your kindness? And who have you judged unfairly? What person have you walked past because of how they looked, because of their clothes, or their tattoos, or their circumstances? Sienna looked past the leather vest and the tattoos and saw a person, not a stereotype. How many times have we judged too quickly, assuming the worst instead of offering compassion? If this story has moved you, don't just watch from the sidelines. Act. Help someone this week. Leave a comment. Tell me about a time when kindness changed your life. If you believe in second chances and communities lifting each other up, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this story with your friends and family, because the more people who see this, the more kindness spreads throughout the world. Now go out there and be someone, Sienna. Be the person who shows up and makes a difference.